Hello students, welcome back to part 3 of lesson planning assistance. And here we are going to be involved in the procedures. Now the procedures for the lesson, um, for preparing for the lesson, excuse me, up until this point, you have been preparing for the lesson. Now you're going to actually be writing up the lesson itself. So that's what this section is about, where it says procedures. So here you click on edit and it'll ask you, well, what type of lesson model of instruction are you going to be using? For the novice teacher, especially my term ones, you're really instructed to just pick one type of instructional model. As you go through the program, you will be able to incorporate many different instructional models in your lesson planning. But for this particular exercise at this time, it is best to just stick with one type of instructional plan. And in your term one students, we always ask that you start with direct instruction, because direct instruction is extremely useful and quite common to use. And you need to understand how to implement a direct instruction lesson efficiently and well in order for you to actually jump into these particular areas, which are a little more complicated, much more interesting for students, but they're a little more complicated to get into and to design. So right now we're only going to work with direct instruction. So I'm just going to click this and then I'm going to save. Then it asks you, what materials are you going to be using for this lesson? And in this case, you'll notice that it is a text box. You need to write down what materials you are going to need for the lesson, and this is why we ask you to do this. We do not want you to begin to teach a lesson and then find out that you forgot to get this and you forgot to get that, because that slows the momentum down of the lesson. You need to have thought through the lesson up uh, thoroughly, to the point of what exactly do I need to teach it and what will the students need to have available to them for them to learn from it. So this is pencil, paper, textbook, the technology you're going to be using. If you have a particular curriculum like a FOSS science kit or open court reading books, whatever that happens to be, you need to write that down here. If you're going to be using technology on a particular website, I like it if you will also write down that you're going to be using BrainPop, and here is the link to that BrainPop. I like it when you put that in materials, because sometimes you forget later on, even though you'll be prompted. So here you will write down whatever materials you're going to need in order to teach the lesson. And then you're going to write down, well, what kind of instructional strategies am I going to use? As you'll notice, it says open. This is the beginning of the lesson. So how are you going to open the lesson? How are you going to prepare the students to accept the information, to be able to understand and make connections with the information that will be the meat of the lesson? So here you are going to describe in detail the open, and you're going to create this section under instructional strategies as a narrative where you're not just going to say, I'm going to show the students a book and then I'm going to read it and then they're going to do something. No, you're going to say the students will come to the carpet, they will sit down crisscross applesauce. I will then introduce the book Three Little Pigs to the students. I will ask the students these questions. What do you see in the book? What do you think is going to happen by looking at the title page? You have to be very explicit and detailed. If you were not, I will kick this back to you, because while you were learning to teach, the only way I can know what's in your head is if you write it down for me. If you don't write it thoroughly, I can't assume that I know how you're going to make things work together. So when you become a teacher and you no longer have this type of document to work with, that's fine. You can abbreviate anything you want. But during this program, you must write a narrative. I need to have this written like it's a play, so I know what you're going to say, what you anticipate the students are going to say, how you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. So here you're going to talk about how you are going to open the lesson. Then you're going to write about what the body of the lesson is. This is where I should see how this open connects with the body of the lesson, what the students are actually going to be learning. This is the meat of the lesson. This can be a lot of different things. I don't know how you're going to structure the lesson, but it has to be written in enough detail for me to understand what you are doing, which is the strategy, and what the students are doing in response, which is the activity. So you want to start getting that into your head now. What you do is strategy. What students do is activity. Your activities have to match what your strategy is, and you have to be able to see how this activity is providing the kind of information and assessments you're looking for that the strategy is prompting. So those two will go together. And then finally, you have the close. All lessons have a close. How do you know that the students got the lesson unless you know how to close the lesson? The students should know when a lesson is over. So you have to write down what is the close. And the close should incorporate the assessment, at least the daily assessment or the lesson assessment of how you know that the students got what you were selling. So here you need to be able to ask questions of the students, or there had to be some kind of evidence that the students provided, or in some way you close this lesson so the students know what's closed, the students know what they learned, and you know what you taught and what was learned. Then finally is your reflection of the lesson. Now, sometimes you won't have a reflection or an analysis of the lesson because you will not have had an opportunity to teach it. But if you do teach the lesson, then you are required to come down here and open this up and write down what is it that you learned about what you did as it relates to the lesson that you just taught. What were your ahas, good or bad? It's okay if you taught a lesson and it didn't go well, but you need to be able to reflect on what was it that didn't go well and how can I fix that in the future. The same thing about something that did go well. Why did it go well? Why did this meet your expectation? Why did this strategy and activity work? What is the evidence that you got from the lesson that let you know that you actually met your mark, that the students actually reached the mastery of that day's lesson? So here you need to fill this in, and you will always fill this in when there is an observation. So let's go ahead and save this. So now that's the initial lesson plan. Whenever you were creating a lesson plan for either observation or for an activity, this is what you will use. When you leave our program, like I said, you will not need to fill anything out in this kind of detail. But it's really important for us at Cal State Teach, and for me personally as your faculty member, to help you understand the habits of mind necessary for you to really think through what you're teaching. Teaching is not serendipitous. You really have to think it through. You really have to think, what is it that I want my students to learn? How am I going to set this up so that they can learn it? And how will I know that they've learned what I've taught them? So always keep that in mind as you are creating and implementing your lesson plans. I hope you find this helpful, and I will be talking to you soon.